Husband had big debts and was unemployed, and he told his rich family that I was the one with big debts and his family. I'm a 27-year-old woman married to Jake, who is 32. We're currently dealing with a major issue, and I need some advice on whether my planned course of action is right. For some context, I met Jake 5 years ago. I still remember our first meeting like it was yesterday. I frequented the same coffee shop daily, and one morning, Jake approached me and asked for my number. Jake is very attractive and looked like he worked in finance, so I didn't hesitate to give him my number. He called me and we talked and decided to go out on a date. From the start, Jake was very open about his family's wealth. He told me that his father had worked incredibly hard to become one of the top real estate agents, providing their family with a very luxurious lifestyle. He asked about my family, and I shared that I came from a lower income background but had worked hard to become an accountant. I had a good income and was self-sufficient, which was a dream come true for someone with my background. Initially, everything seemed perfect between Jake and me. He would take me to fancy dinners, shower me with expensive gifts, and talk endlessly about his family's wealth. He lived in a sprawling mansion, drove luxury cars, and wore designer clothes without a second thought. Coming from humble beginnings myself, I have to admit that I was mesmerized by his lifestyle and felt a bit self-conscious. I would tell him that he was free to find someone more from his status, but despite our different backgrounds, Jake and I connected on a deeper level. I had a stable job that I was proud of, and he admired my determination and work ethic. When I met Jake's family for the first time, I couldn't help but notice the air of arrogance that surrounded them. Their mansion was like something out of a magazine, filled with expensive art and lavish decor. However, what struck me the most was how cold and distant they seemed toward me from our very first meeting. His mother refused to shake my hand and blatantly ignored me. It was as if she had immediately assumed I was only interested in Jake for their money, and she made this very clear through her demeanor and probing questions about my background. His parents wanted to know everything about my upbringing, education, and career, almost as if they were trying to gauge whether I was worthy of being with Jake. His older sister kept asking if I really just happened to meet Jake in that coffee shop, or if it was an elaborate plan. No matter how many times Jake and I clarified that it was he who had asked me out and that I had no idea who he was, she didn't believe us, telling me how everyone knows who they are. To be honest, I genuinely had not heard about them or seen them since I didn't grow up in such a wealthy neighborhood. Regardless of their insults and little jabs, I kept my mouth shut. At the end of the meeting, his dad did admit that I seemed like a hard-working woman, but mentioned that he had always dreamed of watching his son get married to someone wealthier than him. This really offended me since I had never asked Jake to foot my lifestyle, and it was not my fault where I came from. All the challenges I faced made me the strong, independent person I am today, and I was not going to be ashamed of it. After this meeting, I told Jake that I was done meeting his parents and that he would be going to meet his family on his own the next time because I did not want to go through so much scrutiny. He tried to protest, but I stayed firm in my decision. I made my decision and told him how humiliating it was. I also pointed out to him that my parents never treated him this way, so his parents had no right to be so cold and unwelcoming towards me. In the end, he agreed, and since then, he has always gone to meet his family on his own. However, despite what his family thought, our relationship continued to blossom, and soon we were talking about moving in together. I have to add that this was completely Jake's idea. You see, my lease renewal was coming up, and I was looking to find a bigger place to move into for me and my dog when Jake told me that it would be a better idea for us to move in with him. We had been dating for 11 months by this time, so I was a bit hesitant. However, he tried to reason with me and told me how he could see himself spending the rest of his life with me, and moving in was the next logical step in our relationship. I took a few days to think, but in the end I agreed. His house, which had been bought by his father, was really grand, but it always felt a bit too cold to me, like how you step into an interior design showroom where everything was carefully curated but lacked the warmth of a lived-in home. I turned this cold, lifeless house into a home. We had agreed on splitting bills, and I didn't mind since I liked paying for my own things, and I was anyway not having to pay any rent here. I think this is when I started noticing his life more closely now that we were living together. Up until then, I was always dazzled by his charms and the luxurious lifestyle he projected. One of the first things that struck me was the emptiness of his daily routine. Although he worked in finance, he seldom went to his office except for just 2 days a week. He told me how his boss was his dad's friend, so he didn't have to go to the office every day, which I guess made sense. However, instead of working properly from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock, he would easily get tired and irritated and go out shopping. I would be at the office when he would send me multiple pictures of him wearing different luxury brand shoes, asking me which one I liked the best. This would happen at least twice a week, but it was his money, so I didn't say anything. Next, every time he would buy shoes, he would click and post multiple pictures of what he bought and constantly check his phone to see if his friends or followers replied to his story. Jake had become a bit of an influencer since he always posted luxury stuff, so I guess that's why he was always into his phone, chasing after validation and approval. His social media friends would sometimes invite him to parties, but he would never take me with him, giving me excuses like how he is not allowed to bring a +1 and how he just wants to make new friends on his own. Even then, I kept my mouth shut even though it irked me a bit. Next, he bought a luxury sports car. I don't even know how someone can pay so much money for just a four-wheeler. While all of this was happening, I noticed that he had zero interest in paying any of his bills. Even though we had agreed on splitting our bills, he would always end up telling me to pay everything, and this would include his phone and cable bills, which I didn't even use. If I ever brought up that subject, he would tell me how we are partners, and since he is letting me stay for free, I should help out more. Looking back, I don't think my issue was paying his bills, but it was the gut instinct I had that something about him just felt wrong. If he was wealthy enough to buy luxury shoes, clothes, and cars, then why does he need help in paying bills? Obviously, I was grateful that I could stay at his place rent-free, but I didn't mind paying rent and living on my own if that meant that I would only pay my own bills. Unlike him, I had a fixed budget, and I wanted to save as much money as I could so I could one day start a family. I felt like he needed to do the same because if that was not our goal, then I didn't want to be with him. I decided to have a serious conversation where I told him all of this very frankly, and I gave him the option to break up with me if he and I were not on the same page. However, he assured me that he very much wanted to start a family with me and that I was a dependable woman. He told me that he was going to stop spending too much money. I thought everything would be fine after this. However, one day while cleaning his garage on a weekend when he was out golfing, I discovered that Jake had been living a facade in front of the whole world, including me. It turns out that most of what he flaunted was financed through debt and loans. His fancy car and his designer wardrobe were bought on credit. He had recent credit bills due to repay which he had absconded. I was shaken when I went through the bills, which he had apparently hidden inside a shoebox. This meant that he had knowingly kept this hidden from me. I was furious. I waited for him to get back from golfing with his friends. When he did come back, he saw me sitting with all of his bills right in front of the table, and he freaked out. He started yelling at me about why I went through the bills, and I told him how I knew everything, and he could not hide from me anymore. Jake tried to backtrack, telling me how these were just a few bills, and he was working on repaying them. I asked him why he had not just repaid them already since he was bringing in an income every month from his job. This is when Jake confessed to me that he had been out of a job for the last 4 months. I was shocked by this revelation, since he had been going into the office once a week as usual for the last 4 months, and the rest of the days we would text while I was at the office and he was supposedly working from home. I asked him how did this happen and why he never told me about it. Jake opened up about how his boss was a jerk and had gone back on his word, pushing for Jake to go to the office every day since the company was taking on more clients, and Jake needed to have more face-to-face meetings. However, Jake felt it was disrespectful, and he and the boss had a disagreement which resulted in his boss sacking him. Jake went on to tell me how it was not a big deal, and that he would get a job in a jiffy when he would start to apply. My eyes widened in shock as I asked him what the hell he had been doing for the past 4 months if he had yet to apply for a job. Jake replied that he was taking a break for his mental health and that I should not blame him for any of this. I told him that even if he had lost his job, it didn't make sense as to why he was not able to pay bills since he did apparently come from a wealthy family. Jake told me how he did ask his parents for help, but they had refused to help him. He went off about how his parents clearly favored his older sister, Laura, and how unfair this was. I felt like my entire relationship with him had been a lie. The illusion he had portrayed of himself was starting to come down. Clearly, he was not wealthy, and that is why he depended on me to pay his bills while his unemployed self could continue to buy luxury items and post about them on social media. I told him very firmly that I loved him, but that this was not something I signed up for. I told him that I knew exactly how it felt to be broke, and I had worked really hard to come out of it, so I was not going to let anyone drag me down to that place ever again. I informed him that if he didn't agree to change his ways right away, our relationship would be over. That very second, and show me through actions, I would be out of his house with my things that very evening. I guess seeing me this pissed really got through to Jake. He immediately apologized to me and sat down to discuss ways to deal with his bills. I told him that he needed to sell his car, pay back all his credit card bills, and stop buying any luxurious items for a while. Jake tried to refuse, telling me how people were going to judge him and how his friends were going to make fun of him. I told him that I honestly didn't care about any of that because he had mounting debts that needed to be resolved first. He tried to ask me if I could help him pay off some of the loan, but I refused and let him know that this was his responsibility, and I would be paying off our monthly bills and taking care of any daily expenses. I let him know that until he took proactive measures to lessen his debt, I would not feel comfortable discussing a future with him. Begrudgingly, he agreed. Over the following months, Jake took proactive steps to address his debts. We put his car up for sale, and since it was a sports car, we got lucky because we got enough from the sale to pay back his loan and keep a little extra to pay back his other bills. Next, he cut back on unnecessary expenses and focused on repaying his credit card bills. As you can imagine, it was a challenging time for him since he is not used to cutting back on anything. There were moments of frustration and doubt, but I would encourage him to work hard to regain control of his finances. Eventually, Jake managed to clear a significant portion of his debt, and I felt proud of the fact that he was trying. We did discuss him getting a job, but this is when Jake opened up to me about his plan to start his own business. He told me that he had an entrepreneurial spirit and wanted to explore that. I was vehemently against this, as I am far more risk-averse than Jake. I knew he could be very fickle-minded at times, and I didn't know for sure if he had the determination to concentrate on building his business. However, he had worked hard to pay off his debt, so I admittedly didn't fight much during this time. Jake proposed to me, which took me by surprise. He told me how he had listened to all my demands and had paid off his debt, so now we could concentrate on starting a family together. I told him yes, because at the end of the day, I did love him, and all I wanted was for him to keep working hard just like I did so we could both build a life together. He did inform me that his parents were unaware that he would be proposing, so he was a bit nervous to tell them. When he called to inform his parents, they told him that even though they were happy for him and would support him, they really did not expect that he would end up with someone like me. On the other hand, my parents were happy for me. We had a small wedding because I did not want to spend too much money and mess up our credit after Jake had just come out of debt. My parents graciously stepped in to help with the expenses for our wedding, and I took out money from my savings also to pay for our wedding. Jake's contributions, on the other hand, were minimal despite his family's supposed wealth. When our guests marveled at the elegance of the event, some even assumed that Jake and his family had probably footed the bill. Throughout all this, Jake remained silent, never correcting their assumptions or acknowledging the truth. I couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment. It was disheartening to see him bask in the false praise, especially knowing that he had been unemployed for months and hadn't contributed financially as much as one would expect. His parents also shamelessly never corrected anyone, and maybe it was because they felt guilty after that, but they decided to foot our honeymoon bill as a gesture of goodwill. This was unexpected of them, but we accepted since otherwise we may not have even gone for a honeymoon after our wedding. During our honeymoon, Jake worked on starting his own social media agency, just like he had decided, where he would be working with brands and hiring influencers. This is no doubt a very lucrative business, but there are hundreds of agencies like this, and it's difficult to stand out. I would constantly come home to him grumbling about how he either could not rope in an influencer for an event or that he had lost an influencer who was not up for negotiation. Also, brands seldom work with new agencies, so it was really difficult for him to find brands to trust him enough to sign up with him. As a result, the business never earned any income, and I would sometimes beg him to go back to finding a proper 9-to-5 job, even though it wasn't as exciting. Jake would get pissed and tell me how he needed time and that he was going to make it. However, no matter how many events he attended or the influencers he met, his business was not successful and was definitely not dependable. Meanwhile, I was getting frustrated with being the sole breadwinner and working every second of the day that I was awake. I would come home to work more, the dishes were never cleaned, the laundry would be piling up, and the dog would need to be taken for a walk. On top of this, he would wait for me to cook for him while he would tell me about all the bills that needed to be paid. If I ever brought up anything about my work, he would tell me how he was glad he left his job, since he couldn't be as stressed about work as me. This would really irk me the wrong way because I was the one paying for everything with my stressful job while he was off partying every day at various events. I slowly started to resent him more and more. We would do nothing except watch TV together, and it was starting to feel suffocating. On weekends, I sleep a lot because I am constantly burned out from working the entire week. If I ever told him to help me out with chores around the house, he would tell me how starting a business needed his 100% energy and, as his partner, I should be more understanding. Last month, on top of all this stress, I found out that I was pregnant. Now, I have always imagined being pregnant and having a baby. But I don't know why, but I felt like this is not how I would like to start a family. I mean, when you are bringing a child into this world, you want them to have a stable home and 2 providing parents. However, in our case, I was the only one providing, and he was doing nothing to contribute to the household. If I did bring in a child, then I would just have to do even more work on top of everything I was doing currently. I decided to talk to him about my thoughts. Unlike me, Jake was ecstatic and hugged me in happiness. He told me how wonderful this news was and that he could not wait to become a father. When I brought up how exhausted I felt around the house and how having a baby would only increase my work, he told me that he agreed and that he would start taking up responsibilities around the house. I was surprised by his enthusiasm, and I was glad that he was going to step up. In the past weeks, Jake has stepped up. I mean, I still do 80% of the work around the house, like cooking, cleaning, and laundry, but he cleans the dishes, takes out the trash, and takes the dog out for a walk. I thought with time we could get better and better. This past weekend, he told me that he would be going to meet his family, so I informed him that I would tag along since we wanted to make the pregnancy announcement together. I know I did not exactly picture his parents to be thrilled with our pregnancy, but when I announced the news, they were indifferent. His mother barely acknowledged it, and his father just nodded. I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me. I had hoped for at least a little excitement or happiness from them, but their reaction made me feel like an outsider once again. It was as if my pregnancy was just another event in their lives that didn't concern them. Jake tried to reassure me afterward, telling me that his parents just needed time to process the news. However, I couldn't shake the feeling of being unwelcomed and unsupported by his family. I started to worry about the future of our child in an environment where one side of the family was indifferent. Despite Jake's efforts to step up, the strain of being the primary provider and dealing with his family's coldness was taking a toll on me. I wondered if this was the kind of family environment I wanted to bring my child into. When I announced my pregnancy, their faces literally fell. His mother and sister scoffed at me and gave me the dirtiest looks, while his dad looked down as if I had made a grave mistake. His mother looked me straight in the eye and told me how this was just ridiculous, and that there was no need to bring a child into our marriage with the problems we were facing. I asked her what she meant, but she ignored me and excused herself from the table. Jake and I decided to leave because clearly the mood was spoiled, and I had no idea why. On our way back, I asked him what his mother was talking about, but he shook his head, saying he had no idea, and went on to say how it would be a good idea for him to continue meeting his family alone from now on since they were clearly upsetting me. I felt really angry and disappointed with him because I had done absolutely nothing wrong to make his family treat me this way. With a baby coming, I had thought that for once we could all let go of the past for the sake of the child. Yesterday, while I was at work, I received a call from my sister-in-law, Laura. She had never called me before unless it was something really important, so I immediately picked up, thinking maybe something happened to my husband or their parents. In our conversation, Laura told me how she had talked with Jake, who felt they were all really disrespectful towards me. But she wanted to tell me finally exactly why they all felt this way. This is when she went on to tell me that she knew how we were struggling because of all the debts I had, and they didn't appreciate all the work Jake was putting in for me when I was doing nothing to contribute financially. I took a beat to digest the information and then asked her to tell me exactly what she meant because I was confused by what she was implying. Laura then goes on to say that Jake had told them that I had massive debts, and he was the one who had to pay for everything by selling off his car, and he even sacrificed by not buying luxury brands. My head was spinning, as she then went on to tell me how she could not let her brother suffer more, and that I should not baby trap him. I can't even begin to express how pissed off I felt at that moment. This man-child had gone and lied to his family about me being in debt just to save his own face. He clearly didn't want people to think he was broke, so he had made up this messed-up story where he could blame me. Here I was, working hard day and night at a job that I disliked just so that I could pay our bills while he could continue to make up stories. I was so angry that I didn't even want to explain anything to his sister, so I simply told her that she was right and that I should not baby trap him since he was not worthy enough to be a father anyway. I then cut the call and informed my boss that I was not feeling well so I could go back home. I knew my husband was out meeting an influencer, so I quickly gathered my things so I could move out with my dog. I didn't even bother leaving a note and just drove away with everything I owned in my car. Since yesterday, I've been living at my parents' place while Jake has been frantically calling me. He must have talked with his sister because he had sent me messages saying how he could explain everything and how he just needed me to come back home. My parents have no idea yet what is going on, but they know this is a serious issue, so they haven't asked me a lot of questions. I am honestly at a fix. On one hand, I am pregnant, and I want my child to have a father, but on the other hand, I don't want to be with someone who has been lying about me when I have provided him with so much. Am I the asshole for contemplating divorcing my husband after what Laura revealed to me? Update 1: I talked with my parents about everything. My parents agree, just like everyone else on Reddit, that I need to leave my husband. What he did is utterly inexcusable. He went to such extremes to lie about me over the years, even though I had been nothing but a supportive and faithful partner to him. The nerve he had to lie and claim that it was my debt shows that I can't trust him. I am planning to talk to him and let him know my decision to divorce him. Update 2. It's been a week since my last update. I spoke with my husband 2 days ago. He had been relentlessly calling and texting me. He reached out to my parents, who told him that I was staying with them but didn't provide any details. He came over to my parents' place yesterday so we could talk. He was visibly upset and immediately began apologizing. I asked if he even knew what he was apologizing for, and he nodded, explaining that after I left, he called everyone, and his sister informed him about her conversation with me, so he put the pieces together. I asked him why he would fabricate such horrendous lies about me and how insulted I felt when his sister called to accuse me of baby trapping him. He nodded remorsefully and explained that he had always felt insecure around his family. He said that his parents only cared about their wealth and status, so he was too embarrassed to tell them the truth. He went on to say that when his family asked about his car, it was easier for him to blame me and concoct a story about me being in debt and him helping me out, rather than owning up to his mistakes. He told me that he never thought it would be a big deal since I wasn't close to his family anyway. I shook my head in disappointment and told him I had no idea he could be this deceitful and manipulative. I reminded him how much I had worked all these years to support us, yet here he was, shamelessly admitting how easily he had betrayed me. I informed him that I was filing for divorce. Hearing this, he began to plead with me not to go through with it, saying we should think about the baby, but I told him that we didn't have to be married to co-parent our child. I pointed out that the child would be much happier growing up in a stable environment free from the tension and discord in our relationship. Despite his pleas, I remained firm in my decision to end the marriage. Clearly, we had reached a point where staying together was no longer healthy for either of us. The thought of subjecting my child to a tumultuous household filled with arguments and resentment was not something I was willing to entertain. He pleaded a bit more, but eventually, he left when he saw that I wasn't going to change my mind. He tried to apologize to my parents before leaving, but they looked at him with disappointment and didn't respond to his apology. Update 3. Many of you suggested I reach out to his family and clarify everything. Although I don't want to see them, I do think it's right to tell them the truth, once and for all. So I sat down and wrote a long email to his parents and sister yesterday, detailing every expense I've ever paid for Jake, along with screenshots of payments from my bank account. I explained how he was the one with debts and bills piling up while he kept buying luxury items. I let them know that I wanted nothing from them, and Jake was free to walk away from our child if that is what he wished. However, he would be liable to pay child support every month. I informed them of my decision to divorce Jake and told them how they could finally have their wish and marry him off to a much wealthier woman. Since my email, Jake has been furiously texting me because his parents and sister are now bombarding him with anger for lying about me. They have even called me, but I haven't bothered picking up their calls. His sister sent me a text apologizing for what she said and pleaded with me not to leave the family. Honestly, I don't care about their apologies or their opinions at this point. I have already made my decision to move forward with the divorce, and I will be meeting a divorce lawyer next week. As for my pregnancy, I am determined to provide a stable and loving environment for my baby, even if it means co-parenting with Jake separately. I have the support of my family, and I am confident that I can handle the challenges ahead as a single parent. Thank you to everyone who has offered advice and support during this difficult time. This will be my last update as I want to concentrate on myself and my baby.